All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us, whether you're watching on YouTube or you are watching over here on the Zoom. Excited to have you join us. And today we're going to be jumping into another AMA. Part of our AMA series is part of HackFS, where we are doing some quick interviews with founders, entrepreneurs, VCs, accelerators, just kind of give you a sense of what the journey ahead looks like as part of building a project for the first time or for the nth time. So yeah, really excited to have Asta, who's joining us today. She's co-founder and CTO at Privy, who I think a lot of people have probably heard of over the last few years, especially. So yeah, welcome her up onto the stage. And yeah, excited to kind of walk through a little bit more about her journey, experience kind of building in the space. And yeah, of course, at the end, we'll open this up for questions. So it's meant to be collaborative as well. So if you have any questions as we go through, feel free to drop them in the chat, or at the end, if you want to come up on stage and ask them directly, feel free to do so. So yeah, we'll welcome Asta up onto the stage.
Hi there, it's good to meet you all.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Awesome. Well, I think kind of a great place to start, nice and easy. Would just kind of love to hear a little bit more about, how you even got into the space to begin with. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about that journey and how you kind of ended up joining the community.
Yeah, so my background is actually in large scale data infrastructure and machine learning for robotics and self-driving cars. So this is a little bit further from home, but it actually comes from a shared root in excitement about technology and infrastructure and the transformation that you can have working on developer tooling, which is, in my opinion, like the most massive leverage thing that you can do. Developers themselves, like we are already, by writing code, doing work that's super high leverage, and to get to empower developers to build even more of the vision that they're trying to create, it basically sounds like the most exciting thing that I could be doing. So that's a lot of the kind of shared background. But I got into Web3 coming from a place of being really excited to work on privacy and digital identity. I think Web3 with the Web3 has the incentive alignment around really returning control back to users in a way that has created change that is different than I think outside of Web3, where that change comes from more of a compliance point of view. And I was really eager to be a part of what I'm seeing in Web3, which is that we are reshaping the relationship that people have with the apps they use online.
Cool. Very cool. When you were sort of exploring that and learning more about, digital ownership or digital identity, like, were there any kind of like media or books or content or people that like stood out to you as like part of that journey, that early journey?
Yeah. There's a lot of things I was paying attention to, but actually one of the things that I found really exciting was, so my co-founder Henry, before I even met him, I read his like 5-part article series on his work and research into privacy and digital identity. And I found his thinking to be so extremely aligned with the way that I view the world, and also really, really insightful. And it's a big reason why we're working together, because of that alignment and because of our shared care for our work in digital identity. And so that was definitely something that influenced me a lot. I think that the other part of it is that in Web3, we get to be on the ground floor of shaping the narrative and what is possible. And so in some ways, there isn't previously trodden ground here. And that's also really cool.
Very cool. And I think, just because I have to bring the obvious tie-in into the HackFS event, I think at that time, Henry was working at Protocol Labs, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I think he had just left or something like that.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So, maybe it'd be worth jumping in a little bit more into that piece. So, you'd read this kind of set of essays or research, you'd sort of becoming more and more interested personally about the space. How did you sort of get started with Privy? And, I guess you met Henry along the way and maybe reached out to him through that. And but yeah, like what was that kind of early journey like? What were some of the kind of early days?
Yeah, so Henry and I were introduced by a mutual friend, and I was not focused on Web3 at the time. I was thinking about sort of the problems around privacy online and digital identity more broadly speaking. And Henry and I were talking about a lot of the things that that a lot of the vision that we had for how the internet should work and what it looks like when users take control. And it really became apparent that there's the version of working on privacy that looks like essentially like building compliance software or dealing a lot with regulation. And there's the version of it that we found in Web3, which was being driven by a huge number of very excited fast-moving builders who cared about returning control to users, also because that was like fundamental to their product. And users owning their assets and data and having full control is also a part of what makes Web3 successful. So I think that's what caused us to turn our attention to really building for Web3. I think another part of it is I see like Web3 being a place that drives people to experience, an ecosystem with values that are aligned with kind of what I think the internet should look like. But I also see that it's a place where the user experience is like pretty awful, or at least it was pretty awful. And it was a place where it was really hard to get started if you weren't a technical expert. People are telling you to download this like sort of sketchy Fox extension on your browser and then memorize 12 words where if you forget, no one can ever help you, and you're stuck forever. And then you hear stories of people digging around in landfills for their slip of paper. And like, that's not a user experience that I think makes sense for my mom or most of the people who use products online. And frankly, like, I don't even like to deal with that. So so a lot of it was like, I see a huge potential for change here. But in conjunction with getting people to move towards this world we want to live in, we also have to like seriously enable new and different onboarding experiences. And so this is where I think Henry and I have this intersecting excitement around user experience and developer tooling, and the fact that technical decisions are like moral decisions. And if we can make the user experience around user ownership better, then more people more developers will want to and be more easily able to enable user ownership. So that's kind of the like line of thinking that's gotten us here. And yeah, it's been very, very exciting.
That's an interesting sentence. Technical decisions are moral decisions. I guess what do you mean by that when you say that sentence? Like what kind of comes to mind as some of the situations where that sentence may be applicable?
Yeah, we have a whole blog post on this too, but it relates to defaults and alignment. So when you're using when you're like building a product that lots of people use, creating defaults sets what the standard is. Like, even if there are different options, even if people can opt in or opt out, like actually the most user-friendly path is going to be the path that almost everybody chooses. And so if you set a default that is, that doesn't sufficiently stand up for the user or protect the user, then I think, that's like a choice you make about what the status quo should be for your product and for, your part in what the experience online should be. So I think that comes into like, every single design choice has a million options, and acknowledging that technical decisions do carry a moral valence means picking the option in the vast infinite design space that is more respectful of users and pushes the defaults to to a place that that makes more sense for users.
Gotcha. Totally. Yeah, I think especially in the realm of building consumer apps, if you're a developer, you get exposed to a lot of these defaults. And I think the easiest way you can see this as a consumer using software is just like the use of anti-patterns, I think in general, where like, they want you to like go a specific route and it's very obvious which route they want you to go down. And yeah, I think that idea of building defaults that are, in respect to the user and also like provide safety for the user is super, super interesting. So yeah, for anybody building consumer apps, yeah, this is something you'll deal with a lot. Very cool. Okay, let's chat about maybe the early days of building Privy. So you've met Henry, or you guys are sharing ideas about what the base of the internet should look like, and getting excited about this kind of developer focus side. What do you end up building first? Because I know that the first version of Privy is not what the current version of Privy is. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about the early days exploration and what you were working on.
Exactly. So as a team that comes from a data infrastructure background with a high level of attention to user experience and privacy and digital identity, one of the things that we started with was like thinking about data ownership. And so, as you think about a user's path to ownership over, to digital ownership, like what does that mean? It means in large part like your data and your assets. So we came from it initially from the data point of view, which is how do we make data custody a solved problem? And this is something where we were really excited to see kind of regulatory tailwinds make this a problem that more people cared about. We saw a lot of value alignment in Web3, and I also think the sentiment amongst a lot of people building Web3 is we want to make sure that users can preserve their privacy in our products, and so we wanted to build infrastructure that made that even easier. So this started with I think there's many different approaches into privacy and digital identity. This one started at data, and this one started with how can we build a platform where users can take their data with them from place to place. It can own their data, can share and revoke. The idea is that privacy is not about complete like anonymity. It's about control over who you are, and control is about permissions and revocation. Like saying, I want you to delete my data, or I want to give you only a part of the view of who I am. I think that's sort of the foundation for privacy, because complete anonymity is a bad user experience. Like I don't, I don't browse in incognito exclusively because I like to stay logged into some websites. But like I want to have the option to be forgotten, and I want to have the option to be deleted. And so that's where we started. And we built we built a crypto system infrastructure around data ownership and data and user custody of data that made it so that data was only ever available client side on users' devices. It was end-to-end encrypted using keys that users controlled, and this was like really, really technically interesting and exciting body of work. But we saw slow adoption. We had we had dozens and dozens of customers excited in a funnel, and many of them getting very close to committing, a number of them committing, a number of them beginning integration. But the drop off was a lot more steep because things would come up. People would be like, "Oh, well, we have this burning, urgent customer commitment. That means that we have to put data privacy second." And so I think that a lot of that, there's like a couple learnings there. One of them is that privacy has to be like even easier for people to adopt it, because there isn't a lot of I think consumer drive around like sort of specific implementations, and you can't sacrifice developer and user experience for it. And so I think like we were, I think that those are like really good learnings in terms of, I still believe there is an amazing product in this space. And I see companies like Apple solve permissions in a really cool way, where they ask you to select from a couple different options, about location sharing or photo sharing or things like that. So I think this is, another example of like technical decisions being moral decisions, to even offer that in prompt by default, that users can select their permissions instead of just making everything available for everybody at all times. Like, I think that's a great example. So anyways, I think there's continued opportunity here. But I think the thing that we actually saw was happening was a lot of people were coming to use Privy, like sort of user self-custody of data to hold people's private keys. People wanted to have people were okay with touching people's like emails. Developers were okay with holding emails, but they were absolutely not okay with holding private keys, which completely makes sense. And
Totally.
We had built this entire crypto system around securing like user custody data, and everybody really wanted to use it to secure user owned keys. And so we moved in a direction of like, this is, coming at digital identity, you can come from the data side, but you can also come from the asset side. And there's a lot more momentum around coming from the asset side. And also people were like hacking our product to use it for the asset side anyways. So if we can, and this still continues to serve our vision around user ownership and around transforming the user experience of Web3 so that user ownership is possible and can be the default. And this is where we were like, okay, let's make this use case first class then. Like, everybody's kind of hacking our product to do it anyways. How do we make it as easy as one line of code? How do we make it super integrated into every application? And how do we make this experience the reason why people get to build in Web3 and why people get to use products in Web3? And so we launched and here, the reason why we went into authentication is for a user experience problem, which is and also custody. Users need to authenticate directly with the key management service in order to be the ones who own their data and own their assets and so on. And if you had if you separated the authentication for the key management service with the authentication for the app, then users would have to log in twice, and that is too much UX.
Bad UX.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we extended our authentication platform so that everybody can use Privy authentication and get a user custodial wallet along the way. And this is like, kind of all the pieces start falling into place for us to kind of fix this big onboarding problem that we saw in Web3 from the days that we initially got started, where we can onboard people into this ecosystem. We can be their touch point for logging in, for creating accounts, for gaining access to blockchain infrastructure and more along their onboarding journey. And I think that sort of like really resonated with people when we launched. And also, like, the big kind of controversial thesis at the time was, hey, your users are users. They're not just like an anonymous wallet. It actually is important for people to be able to bring their data from different sources together and share that with you, so that they can have like a holistic experience in their app. And so that all came together. When we launched embedded wallets, it was like Thursday at like 10 p.m. and we shipped that SDK out. And we told a bunch of customers that Privy was live. And like 6 of them started integrating that night. We got people downloading our SDK and integrating that night. And by Friday morning, we had like messages streaming in on Telegram and Slack, asking us questions and for support and showcasing their progress on the integrations. And it was really, really stunning.
Amazing. I was going to ask you there, like, how you knew you stumbled onto something there, but I guess that kind of answers that question right away. It's that like clear user adoption right away. I think just to kind of highlight back, that story from, the V1 of Privy to where Privy is now, like, I think one of the things to highlight, especially as, people on this call are building their first project, like your first idea doesn't have to, first of all, be perfect. It doesn't have to be the idea that you run with for the next 5-10 years. I think the main thing that's most important to take away from there is listen to the users, right? Like your users were doing this somewhat anti-pattern behavior that you had on your product where you could like store these like private keys, but like actually like it turns out that was fundamentally the thing that people really needed, right? So I think, being able to listen to users and iterate and like you said, even launch something on a Thursday night without too much fanfare, but get that in the hands of people that you were building with, ended up being a big explosion for Privy. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
I think it's like the saying is, you have a vision for where the what you want the world to look like, and you like find the version of that vision that meets the market where it is today, and that becomes like the path to meeting the market, but also shaping the market and your customers to get to the end kind of world that you want to live in.
Totally. Okay, sweet. Awesome. I'm going to turn it over to everybody else in just a second. But I guess before that, this is a hackathon and it's still pretty early into the event. So people are still kind of figuring out where they want to settle and what they want to build. So I guess kind of curious, if you were at a hackathon today, what are some of the spaces you'd be exploring or some of the projects you'd be excited about building?
Yeah, I think that there's a few things that stand out to me about the projects that are super successful today. One is that they often combine a Web3 experience or a component with something that touches the real world, whether that is, checking into a restaurant or, buying a digital collectible or interacting with your friends. There's like a real world component. And I think that creates this like very rich experience that is super cool. So I think that's like one thing that I'm paying a lot of attention to, is what it means to tie in data and real world experiences together with Web3. I'm also really excited about things that are fun. Like I think that that leaning into both like, as a developer, your personal sense of fun, and also what is fun for users is like just a very joyful thing to do, and also a place where there's a lot of energy and excitement. I think I have like frequently in the past spent more time thinking about like what should I do, or like what is a kind of good opportunity generically. And I've these days been finding that people do their very, very best and most interesting work when they're doing stuff that they're like really inspired by, stuff that they find fun. Totally. Or stuff that users find fun. So I think that's like another thing for at least a big learning for me, to really lean into that sense of intuition. So I think those are the two big call outs. Maybe like mobile is the other one, where we're seeing mobile be a frontier. Like 90+% of consumers encounter products exclusively on mobile, or mobile first. And building on mobile is the platform where people have some of the best user experience, and like how can we build experiences that are better for people in a platform that they most enjoy.
Totally. I think cool highlight on this side, like from some of those ideas, like if people want to be inspired by a real life version of some of those that has some of these features, I think Blackbird is a really good example of like every Friday I go to my like Blackbird coffee shop in the morning and get my like
Yeah.
points. So it works for
Nice.
me. And I think they're using Privy under the hood too, right? Is that right?
They are.
Cool.
They're a
There you
Privy
go.
customer.
There you go. Well, cool. Awesome. I did see one question in the chat, I think mostly along what Privy is directly solving. So a question from Ayush that was, is Privy just an authentication system provider, or is it actually creating user profiles on the back end and mapping all those different authentication profiles to a single wallet or profile, I guess?
Yeah, so we create a model of a user, and there are different accounts that can be used to authenticate and that are linked to that user. So a user could have like a linked email account or a linked Google account, and whenever they sign in and verify their email, then they're logged into that user as that user. And that user is associated with a wallet. And so that's kind of the data model or the architecture.
Gotcha. Cool. I think that did answer the question. There's a question from Ram that I think will take a little bit longer than 2 minutes to get to, but I guess maybe as a way to chat a little bit about this situation, I guess curious, like how is Privy thinking about, privacy within the user? I know you mentioned, that this is an initial interest in when you're coming into the space. Like how is Privy handling the privacy of the user data and whether or not that's accessible to other applications or stuff like that?
Yeah, so users are currently app specific, which means, and this is for a privacy and security reason. In order to take on the body of work which we are engaged with right now in Q2, to make these users global and accessible across apps, we need to build in protections around access to different to user data and user assets from different apps than the ones where they were acquired or first entered. That means building consent screens, building permissions, building a security model that protects and asks for and like notifies and asks users for permission on things like transactions or sharing data. And so that's a lot of where we've worked to build the foundation for our work here, and we get to build on top of it. So that's a lot of where I think we're like, this is what we've been trying to do since the very beginning. And
Exactly.
we finally built enough of a foundation to begin like really moving the needle on this. So it's been some of the most exciting product work that we've been doing.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess in a way you're now coming back to some of the work that you were doing initially as a way to kind of solve those down the road problems.
Exactly.
Okay, very cool. Awesome. All right. Well, I do want to be respectful of your time. So we're at 2:30 Eastern at least. So I just want to say thank you so much for both coming on and sharing some insights about your experience, as well as a big thank you to Privy for being such a consistent partner of ETHGlobal's over the last few years. And excited to keep working with you guys over the next events as well. So thank you again, Asta. Really appreciate your time. And we'll catch everybody on the next AMA.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Take care.